Hi, welcome back to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. We are starting chapter 15 today, selecting your music. And basically, this whole chapter is all about music. And Rick Warren did that because he says that if he were asked what he would do differently if he could start over again, he said it would be the music. He says, from the first day of the new church, I'd put more energy and money into a first-class music ministry that matched our target. In the first years of Saddleback, I made the mistake of underestimating the power of music, so I minimized the use of music in our services. I regret that now. He says a song can touch people in a way that a sermon can't. Music can bypass intellectual barriers and take the message straight to the heart. He says it's impossible to appeal to everyone's musical preferences and taste. Music is a divisive issue that separates generations, regions of the country, personality types, and even family members, so we shouldn't be surprised when opinions of music differ in the church. You must decide who you're trying to reach, identify their preferred style of music, and then stick with it. He says the style of music you choose to use in your services will be one of the most critical and controversial decisions you make in the life of your church. It may also be the most influential factor in determining who your church reaches for Christ and whether or not your church grows. You must match your music to the kind of people God wants your church to reach. It will determine the kind of people you attract, the kind of people you keep, and the kind of people you lose. So he says there's not such a thing as like a good or bad music. There's all different kinds, and it's all based on preferences and your cultural background and many different aspects. But and he says churches need to admit that there's no particular style of music that is quote unquote sacred. He really emphasizes that what makes this music sacred or special would be the words and the message that it conveys. He uses the example, you could play a tune and you don't have any words. How do you define the value and meaning of that song? He says songs that are now, if you look at history, we see that there's always been this issue of people thinking that what was before was better than what is now. So he uses the example, for example, of Silent Night. So when Silent Night was first published, George Weber, music director of the Mainz Cathedral, called it vulgar mischief and void of all religious and Christian feelings. Another example was Messiah, Handel's Messiah. That was widely condemned as vulgar theater by the churchmen of the day. The Messiah was panned for having too much repetition and not enough message. Even the whole concept of singing hymns was once considered worldly, or not something you'd sing in church in Baptist churches. He used the example of this pastor Benjamin Keach in the 17th century, who was a first pastor to introduce singing hymns into an English Baptist church. But the parents didn't want it. They were convinced that singing was foreign to evangelical worship. So it was very controversial. And at one point, he was able to get them to agree to sing one hymn after the Lord's Supper. But he had to agree to allow people to leave if they didn't want to sing. And then 6 years later, the church agreed to sing a hymn on days of public thanksgiving. And it wasn't until another 14 years passed that the church people could agree that hymn singing was appropriate in church. But even then, 22 of his congregation left the church so that they could join a non-singing church. However, it caught on anyway, and eventually that non-singing church looked for a pastor that was into singing. So things change. You can slow progress, but you can't stop it. Saddleback is unapologetically a contemporary music church. Years ago, after being frustrated with trying to please everyone, I decided to survey our church. I passed out a 3x5 card to everyone in the crowd service and asked them to write down the call letters of the radio station they listened to. They found out that 96% of the people listened to a very similar radio station, so they decided to just go ahead and adopt that as their style of music. So that's I'm going to go into today, and then tomorrow we'll finish up that chapter. Thanks a lot. Bye.